So for as long as I can remember, there has always been this point of discussion at the start of every console generation, and that is cross-gen games. Should we encourage them? Should developers be focusing on last-gen hardware when the new consoles are out? And what is the appropriate cutoff date for when we expect cross-gen games to actually stop releasing and developers to be fully focusing their efforts on the new gen hardware? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Now, I think it's something to note that we always have to keep in mind that the publishing companies, more specifically, are in this industry to make a profit. And what you have here is a large install base of consumers who are using the old legacy hardware, the PS4 and the Xbox One in this case. And they're not looking to upgrade to the PS5 or the Series X/S right away. You know, it may take them a couple months, it may take them a year or so, but this is not something that's been on their minds. Until they're fully ready. And this is basically the case with new technology and everything like that. You know, there's always sort of been this slow adoption rate. And I feel that this generation specifically, we're actually going to start seeing a much longer adoption rate than we ever have in the past. And I think a lot of that has to do with the current world pandemic and the economy and all that stuff. A lot of people just simply don't have the excess funds as well to basically purchase these machines. And then on top of that, you have the people who really want to buy these machines who simply can't because the stock numbers are so low. It's such a well desired item that the moment that they go up in stock within a minute or two, and that may even be a little bit gracious, they go immediately out of stock. And so, you have this sort of the difficulties of the current world situation, and then you have the manufacturing trying to meet with the demands. On top of that, you have scalpers purchasing these consoles and reselling them for large amounts of profit on eBay and such. So it's going to be very interesting to see this generation. I want to actually see exactly how long it takes the majority of people to purchase basically a next gen system or a current gen system, if you want to say, especially with how everything is going on right now. I think this generation is going to be a little bit of an anomaly just because of everything that's going on. Now, something to keep in mind is that last generation, it was a bit interesting because at the start of the PS4 and Xbox One, we did not have backwards compatibility. Microsoft later updated the Xbox One, I think it was 2 or 3 years into the console's lifespan, to actually eventually play a select number of 360 games and original Xbox games, but at the start, none of those consoles were backwards compatible. And you can even argue that that those consoles don't have native backwards compatibility support, that it's just through software emulation. Sony just never bothered with it on the PS4, instead opting to encourage people to sign up for PlayStation Now, their streaming service, which some people use and some people like and stuff. But I feel like for the people who really care about backwards compatibility, right, we're talking about the people who have game collections and like to go back and revisit games, the idea of streaming isn't so attractive, primarily due to the degrading in image quality as well as the loss in reaction and input time, the lag. And so that to me is one of the reasons why I never bothered with PlayStation Now. I'd rather build up a collection. And if you have basically the consoles, basically the philosophy has always been that if you wanted to play backwards compatible games, generally the people who care about backwards compatibility will keep their old gen consoles. And I've always done that. I know a couple people who have done that, but some people just want to focus and play on the very brand new stuff. And that's always, that's also understandable. So I think it's very interesting because we have backwards compatibility, we're actually seeing developers taking advantage of it in a very different way, to the point where last generation, because we didn't have it, a lot of games were actually re-released or remastered to basically be on those consoles. You had The Last of Us remastered for PS4. You had Tomb Raider Definitive Edition as well. You had a couple of really good handful games, especially at the start, and it actually continued throughout this past generation, where we saw a lot of remasters, a lot of remakes of older gen consoles, more so than we saw in the previous generations. I think quite specifically because, again, we didn't have backwards compatibility on these machines. You can play the entire Resident Evil saga on the PS4 and the Xbox One. Just besides a few of the smaller scale games, spin-off games, if you will, the majority of mainline Resident Evil games are all available on that console. You have all the Yakuza games, which are playable now on the PS4, and even the Xbox One they just released it for. So you have all these games that had to be re-released and remastered to some extent for these new consoles so that people could play them again. And right now with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, you just plop in your disc of your PS4 game or your Xbox One game and it plays. In the case of the Series X, you can play the select number of 360 and original Xbox games just like the Xbox One and One X do. And it could play those games through that machine, but all generally Xbox One games are playable on the Series X. And what we're starting to see is very interesting because we have developers who are releasing their games and they're actually saying that they're taking advantage of the next gen console in some way, but they're not actually releasing next gen physical versions of the game. Instead, what you're going to be doing is buying the last gen version of the game, then putting your disc into the console, and then basically it's going to know, I guess it's going to give you a game update or something like that. It's going to automatically know, okay, you're playing this on the PS5, you're playing this on a Series X. Upgrade the visuals, unlock the frame rate, so on and so forth. Mass Effect Legendary Edition, the remaster of the Mass Effect games, is going to be taking advantage of the PS5 and the Series X. You're going to get native 4K, you're going to get 60 FPS, but they are not releasing a PS5 or Series X version of that game. Nier Reincarnation, which is a remake of the original Nier, it's going to be playable on the PS5 and the Series X, but the developers are not going to be releasing a PS5 or Series X specific version. And even you have games like Biomutant, which has been in development for a very long time. It finally got a release date for May, which you're going to be able to play those games on the new gen systems. But here we are 6 months into the console's lifespan of the PS5 and the Series X, and you're going to be buying that game on the case it's going to say PS4 and Xbox One, but again, it's going to take advantage of the next gen systems just through a digital upgrade and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a bit interesting because I like to collect games. I like everything to sort of be uniform, I just recently purchased the Dark Pictures anthology Little Hope, which is a playable game on the Series X. It's truly an Xbox One game, but I purchased it with the intention to play it on the Xbox Series X. And what I had to do is I went out and I purchased is just a box, an empty case for the game that just says the Xbox branding on the top, so it looks like the rest of my Series X games. Because when you purchase Little Hope for Xbox One or Xbox Series X, you're purchasing the game and on the case it says Xbox One, but on the spine it has the new branding. It's a bit weird, but anyway, I went out and I bought basically an empty case. I paid $5 for someone to basically send me an Xbox Series X packaging case for the game. So I put in my slipcover in, and it looks effectively like a Series X game, but I had to sort of go out of my way and do that. And I'm wondering if I'm going to have to basically create my own custom cover for games like Nier Reincarnation or even like Biomutant if I get those games with the intention to play them on PS5, because if they're not going to be releasing a native PS5 release of those games, which they aren't, you're going to be able to, again, play those games on those machines, but you're not going to be purchasing the game for PS5, you're going to be purchasing the game for PS4. If they're not going to release it in that case, then for me, it's like I'm going to, again, because I like that parity, I'm going to have to go and create my own custom case. So it's a bit interesting. We're seeing developers actually sort of work their way around this. And I understand their perspective because in their mind, it's like I'm saving on manufacturing costs. Why should I have to produce two versions of the game when the new consoles can play the old version just fine, and most people download their games anyway? They're not going to be purchasing a physical copy, so we're just going to produce and release one version of the game, and it'll play on both machines. And I get it for efficiency purposes. It's just that for me specifically, I like having all of my things sort of uniform, and that's sort of why I feel like I'm going to have to be going out and purchasing a lot of basically empty cases for the Xbox One because they're proprietary, but also printing out a lot of PS5 sort of makeshift cover arts for a lot of these games. I'm actually curious to see when Cyberpunk 2077 gets released with the full next gen upgrades and it's fully, taking advantage of the next gen hardware, I'm actually hoping that they're going to re-release the game on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X with the new branding and everything like that. But I just have a feeling they're not going to do that. They're probably just going to say, purchase the PS4 disc, purchase the Xbox One disc, and then it'll just play like butter on those machines. So I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a interesting cutoff surrounding that. So, my stance on cross-gen games is this. I understand why it's a thing. I do actually always prefer, that developers really take advantage of the new generation hardware as much as they can. And I think that this generation, we saw a lot of games towards the end of the generation that just really looked incredible. The Resident Evil remakes to me looked fantastic. The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, I just played those games and they looked phenomenal. And they're last gen games in their core, the legacy, it runs on the last gen machines. So at their core, they're last gen games, but they look really, really attractive and really, really good nonetheless. And that was something that I was making a point in my backwards compatibility videos when I was playing Days Gone, testing it on the PS5. I was telling you guys, like look how beautiful the game is. It's native 4K, it's 60 FPS. Does this suddenly look bad to you because it's not taking advantage of the new hardware? And I always think back to my original video on the Watch Dogs graphics controversy. It's one of my most viewed videos on this channel. But I actually at that point in time defended the game, and I understand a lot of people weren't really happy that I did that. But the point in me making that video was to basically ask the question about what is next gen? What is the identifier of next gen? Is next gen purely just visuals, or is next generation about the next generation experience? For me, it's like when I looked at Watch Dogs, yes, there was a graphics downgrade, but I was looking at the interaction of the world. I was looking at the point that when you walk down the street in the original Watch Dogs, it's like, wow, some random civilian just accidentally rear-ends some other guy, and they get out of the car and they start arguing. And when we saw that original gameplay demo, despite how beautiful the graphics are, if you actually look at the environment and look at the way the civilians are actually talking to each other, one of the civilians actually turned around and was like, oh wait, I forgot to tell him something, and finished her conversation. And it was the small things like that really make for a very believable world, more so than just the storytelling and more so than the graphical fidelity. It's about the placement of the world and how it feels and the interactions and stuff. And we saw a lot of that in the case with something like Red Dead Redemption 2, where it's like, wow, you can actually interact with the civilians so much more so than you can do in something like Grand Theft Auto 5, And so that to me is what next gen has always been about. Next gen has always been about those sort of, new ways to experience the game and new ways that it makes you feel like it's an actual living, breathable place, with a high level of interaction and so on. So I'm hoping that we get more of those experiences that are like kind of new, interesting ways to interact with the current play space that we're given in. And of course, taking full advantage of the new hardware with new graphical fidelity. Something that I noticed playing Spider-Man Miles Morales and now playing Demon's Souls, a lot of the graphical fidelity that I'm noticing with these games, like it's a beautiful looking game in its own right? But I noticed that this generation, what it's really doing for me is it's adding in the small, subtle details. It's the small things like the hair rendering and the character facial animations in Spider-Man Miles Morales. It's the little things like in Demon's Souls, the textures on the bricks and stuff, and just the moving trees and the fire and the particle effects. It's all the small little things that when you look at it, it's just like a really pure amount of detail that really helps bring life into the scene. So that to me is something that I've appreciated so far experiencing these new games. And yeah, you look at Spider-Man Miles Morales, it is a cross-gen game, but at no point did I sit there playing the PS5 version with ray tracing and everything and did I say to myself, wow, this looks like, Spider-Man 2018, but just slightly prettier. It actually did look a generation apart to me and was very, very, very impressed by the visuals. So yeah, just I guess what is your stance on it? Cross-gen games. I know a lot of you probably don't have the PS5. You don't have the Series X right away. But For me personally, I always have been that person who's been sort of the wait and play type of person. Most people are going to be purchasing these new games that are coming out, something like Resident Evil 8 maybe, or more specifically like Hitman 3 that just released recently. Most people are going to be purchasing these games on the last gen systems because they want to play those games and they just don't have the consoles to play those games at. But I look at these games, and if I didn't have a PS5 and I didn't have an Xbox Series X right now, I honestly wouldn't be purchasing any of those games until I get the new generation hardware, just because I'm the type of guy who likes to have the best experience. And I know eventually I'm going to be getting the new hardware, so I don't mind waiting a little bit until I can finally get my hands on the hardware and then purchase the games. But it just so happened that I was very fortunate this generation once again to have both consoles on release, to be able to get both consoles on release, and I'm playing those games as I would have always wanted and intended to play them on the new generation hardware. So let me know what you guys think about that. Cross-gen games. Do you like the idea of it? Do you wish developers would take full advantage of the hardware? And what do you really feel is like the latest cutoff date? Like how long should cross-gen games be a thing if they are a thing? It's crazy to think about, but last generation, Metal Gear Solid 5 was a cross-gen game. That was 2 years into the lifespan of the PS4 and Xbox One, and it's still released on PS3 and 360, Metal Gear Solid 5. So that was a very long time. What is the appropriate cutoff date? So I'll keep an eye out in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.